The Loaded Radio in your face podcast. All right, hey, it's Scott Penfold, and it is another edition of the Loaded Radio podcast. And want to thank you for hanging out, tuning in. As a really good show this week, man, we're going to be talking to the one and only Jack Owen. And you're probably thinking, wait, how do I know that name? Well, Jack Owen was actually one of the founding members of the band Cannibal Corpse, death metal icons Cannibal Corpse. And he stayed with the band from 88 when they formed until 2004 when he moved on. We'll be talking about that a little bit later. And then he spent some time with Deicide, leaving in 2016, and then the following year rejoining his one-time Cannibal Corpse bandmate, Chris Barnes, with the band 6 Feet Under. And they've got the new album out now called Nightmares of the Decomposed. Into some classic, crunchy, awesome-sounding death metal, I gotta say, man. Jack, thanks so much for joining us here on the Loaded Radio podcast this week, man.
Right on. My pleasure.
Great to be talking to you. Now, before we get into the album, how did you get involved and get back to working with Chris Barnes again after so many years?
I've never had animosity with Chris since the beginning of Cannibal, so I've been in touch with him over the years and talked about working together when I was still in Deicide. Timing just wasn't right, but when I quit Deicide, I was ready for a gig, so I just contacted him and he said, yeah, we could use a second guitar player.
And what was it like recording actually with Chris, like going through the recording process with Chris again after all these years? Was it like, that old magic from the, back in the day with Cannibal Corpse, or was it like a remote kind of deal? What exactly was it?
Well, we live on 4 corners of the country, so we didn't get to play the songs together before we recorded, but we've been touring since 2017, so I think the chemistry is still there. We have a rapport that we have on stage and a friendship that we have. So it was easy, and the other guys in the band are great too. It's like a brotherhood. Very comfortable to write and put together and get recorded. It was basically sending files all over the country for everyone to record.
So essentially it was just like you guys emailing out riffs to each other while Chris would bang out lyrics.
Pretty much, yeah. It was like I moved into a new house, I think in early 2018, and I was able to set up my whole home studio, like a multi-track and amps and everything, and I just got to writing. I wrote like 2 or 3 songs and sent them to Chris, and he loved them, so he just said, keep on writing, and I think I wrote about 20 songs.
Well, one of the songs that definitely stands out to me is Blood of the Zombie. Just killer riffs, classic death metal feel, and it's just got like an insane animated video as well that people got to see. You got to check it out online for yourself. How did that come about?
Chris has a buddy, I think he's in South America, that does all that. Kind of 3D graphics and animation, and I'm sure he conceptualizes it, and so far he's come up with everything Chris wants.
Now, going back into some history, I mean, you walked away from Cannibal Corpse back in, 2004 after 9 albums, if you include the live works. Now, you've been with this band from the formation in 88 until 2004, so what exactly happened to make you walk away from Cannibal Corpse?
It was just becoming a grind, so just time to walk away rather than not enjoying it. So I just bailed out with not even knowing what I was going to do, but Deicide needed a guitar player, luckily. Just like something that felt natural, like my life was changing in a lot of ways at that time, so...
Now, do you still keep in touch with anyone from the Cannibal Corpse camp, like bassist Alex Webster or drummer Paul Mazurkiewicz?
We have been, but maybe for the past couple years, not really. They're busy with the grind still.
Right. And then you had from 2006 to 2013, it was your time with Deicide. Now, how was it working with that band? More in particular, how was it working with frontman Glenn Benton from that band?
It was a little rough at times because we're very different people. He's very outspoken, and I'm more of an introvert. So he doesn't really know who I am. Like he's mentioned that. Like I don't even know anything about him. Kind of a little bit of animosity between us. So, I mean, not major, like not fighting, but just like a conflict of personalities.
You know, I totally get it, and it's really not all that surprising. But just looking back at I guess your amount of influence and participation in the subgenre known as death metal, were you guys even aware of the genre you were creating back then, or like what was going on?
Back then it was just wanting to be like the bands that we idolized. Like initially, of course, we liked bands like Kiss and Iron Maiden and things like that, Motorhead. So it's just start a band and see what happens, and not really thinking that you're involved in a genre and a movement. But I guess over time, it's like Florida death metal, being involved in that, even though we were from New York. But as far as the genre, it's represented very well today, and I think we survived the flooding of the zone by the labels in the 90s. Unfortunately, some bands have fallen by the wayside, but, you know, bands like Immolation and Vader are still plugging along, and they should really have been bigger in the genre.
Now, the industry is just getting killed right now. Obviously, I mean, a lot of musicians struggling to make ends meet. Live shows just not really happening. I mean, they're happening, but they're not really happening. Now, besides doing any work on the album, what have you been keeping busy with during the whole pandemic?
Yeah, it's like we just squeezed in the recording by the middle of March, and before everything shut down. I wouldn't want to fly anytime after that. Yeah, once everything shut down, it was like, okay, set up the home studio in my new house in the basement, writing more stuff for that, and then writing, you know, whatever comes out. If I have a drum beat, I can write to that. So if it's thrashy or death metal or black metal, whatever. So yeah, the only good thing to come out of the pandemic is probably every band is going to have 4 or 5 albums worth of material, sleeping more and writing more.
Oh, I get the feeling 2021 is going to be a year just full of albums from every genre, you know what I mean? I wanted to ask you about the recent passing of Eddie Van Halen. Did you ever have the chance to meet Eddie? Were you influenced by him at all?
Oh, man, he was a huge influence. I think I got on such a Van Halen kick, like learning all the early stuff and driving my ex-wife insane with it, and then I would go into practice and play all the Van Halen stuff I learned, and Barrett called me Eddie Van Owen at one point. Very sad. It's like how he just disappeared for a while, and then it just comes out like that. It's really sad. But, I mean, an innovator, an influence on everyone, really. Like, he was always writing, recording, producing. Came to a halt. Sucks. And Keith Richards is still alive.
Yeah, Keith Richards is alive. I mean, doesn't that just blow your mind?
All the people that are leaving us, and Keith Richards is still around.
You know, I'd actually read in a recent interview that one of your biggest influences in guitar was actually your father, who would back in the day apparently pull out his acoustic guitar and play old country songs by Hank Williams Sr. Is that right? Is that what happened?
Yeah, it's a perfect confluence of my brother was 5 years older than me, and he had all the albums by like Kiss and Yes and Emerson, Lake and Palmer, so I was listening to that. And then my dad had a guitar. He would just play. I think he played and sang when he was in the Korean War, so he introduced everybody over there to Hank Williams Sr. So yeah, he loved classic country, and yep, that was the confluence. There's a guitar, and my brother's got all the cool music. After I broke his acoustic guitar, he got me my own electric.
It's really great how that kind of correlates all together, man. It's so cool. And you know, Jack, I can't thank you enough for joining us this week on the Loaded Radio podcast. Of course, the name of the new album is Nightmares of the Decomposed, and it is brand new stuff from 6 Feet Under. Go get it, stream it, whatever you gotta do. It sounds great. It's killer. If you dig death metal, this is your album, man.
Right on. Cool.
I'm Scott Penfold. Don't forget, check out loadedradio.com for the 24-hour stream, as well as all your updated hard rock and metal news on a daily basis. And we'll talk to you again real soon right here on the Loaded Radio podcast.
Loaded Radio.